Here we are again. This is how we left our scene the last time, and this tutorial is going to be all about bringing things together, and this is kind of like the final tidy up before we go and set things up for our complete animation. And what we need to get sorted out is the lighting. There's some materials issues that we need to sort out. Some of these rocks are rather an odd shape for rocks. So let's take things one thing at a time. Let's tidy up the rocks. We can see that there's some rocks around here that don't really look like rocks, they look more like dice. My fault entirely. So I'm going to either edit or add some things in to help disguise them. So if I hide the render view, first thing is that rock there. We're going to go into object mode. We're still in white paint from before, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate that rock. I'm going to move it down and I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to bring it a bit more towards us, and maybe scale it. So now that rock looks less of a square lump than it did, but I'm also going to go in and I'm going to edit that rock a bit, edit the shape of it. And this is something that's quite easy to do if you wish to. I'm going to punch it in a bit in that corner. Down here I'm going to pull it out, and here as well, so the whole thing looks less regular. If we view that from the camera again, you see we've changed the profile of it a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit. And this rock here, and I'm spending extra time on these rocks because they're close. They're close to the camera, they're going to be very visible. So I just want to make sure that these rocks look a bit better than perhaps they otherwise would. Now with this one I'm going to create a bit of textural detail on the top surface. I'm going to do that by moving some of these faces up. In, and that just makes it look less like a block. And this one over here I think needs looking at like that as well. So we'll select that one, go into edit mode, and we'll play a bit. We'll drop that centre down there, drop this one down, down, drop that down, and we're starting to get a rock that's not quite so regular. Now this one I actually want reasonably regular, so but I want to flatten the top of it. Kind of like that. Okay. Cool. What I meant to do was that, because we need to sort out this here rock here. And I think what we're going to do with that is we're going to rotate it and scale it. going to scale it up a bit. I'm going to make it bigger. I'm going to make it rougher. See here, I've still got the modifier on there. Don't want to make it too rough and too strange, but that is now definitely not a square shape, which is what it was before. And I can do the same with this one. It is the easiest way to modify these rocks, to stop them from looking quite so square. Something like that. And I think that's all we need to do with those rocks. Now we've got some material issues. There was a material issue with the grass on the top there. It's far too bright. So if I select one of the bluffs, remembering they've all got the same materials, so I can, if I change one, I change the other. I'm going to drop the intensity down. I'm going to go into the texture, and you can see this is very bright in places, so I'm going to drop the brightness down, like that, and that should be enough. That should do what we want. Now the material on these rocks is also a bit of a problem. If we look, we can see really there's not enough surface variation. There's too much glint in these rocks, so I need to take that down. The hardness is too high. Something like that might be a little better. I want to change the colour slightly, and the easiest way to do that is to change the colour on the texture. And I can do that by dropping the blue. Kind of turns it green. And dropping the green. And you can see we're starting to get closer to the sort of colour we're getting closer to the sort of colour of the bluffs. It's got a little bit of colour to it that's different now. And I'm now at the stage where I want to re-render to see what those changes have done to the scene. So I'm going to re-render, put you on pause. So this is what the scene will now look like. As you can see, we've fixed that problem quite well up there. Still not happy with the rocks. I think what it is they need to be more rough, and obviously I'll need to change these rocks, these larger rocks, to match them. So yeah, so that's what I'm going to do now. So I'm going to roughen up this rock a bit more by adding another rock texture, but this time it's only going to affect the actual normal. And this rock texture is a pretty lumpy one. If I can find it. Half a rock. Stop this rendering, otherwise the preview won't work. You can see this is quite lumpy, which is good. It's exactly what we want. And we're going to make it cubic. Get rid of that. I'm going to put that in. And as you can see now, we've got a lot lumpier rock. I think I need to take that glimmer there, down even further. So let's try rendering that again now. As you can see, we're getting there. We've now got a substantial amount of texture on those rocks. It's possibly not deep enough, so we can deepen that texture. Like so. And I still don't really like the colour. In fact, I think they were better off the grey colour they were originally, with maybe a slight tweak. So I'm going to go back. As you can see, set these to 1 again. We're back with the original grey colour, and maybe knock it down a little bit in brightness, and we'll see what that's like. And that, I think, is just what the doctor ordered for those rocks. I'm going to leave the large rocks as they are because I'm quite happy with that. That looks fine. It's typical large slabs of bedrock. Now this sandstone here, I'm now starting to think that that's a bit too coloured. So select one of the bluffs, go into our sandstone material, go into the texture, and the brightness of it is fine. It's just the fact that it's brightly coloured I don't like. So what I'm going to do is reduce the saturation. Something like that perhaps. And I'm going to reduce the intensity to give the shadows a bit more depth. And we'll see what that's like. So that looks fine. Those rocks are fine, the grass is fine, these rocks are fine. The only thing that's left really is the water. It's too ripply at the moment, so I want to iron those ripples out a bit, and there's a number of ways I can do that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the contrast on the texture. So if we go into texture mode, you can see there's the texture there, and I'm just going to snap the contrast down. I'll reduce that to 0.5. If we re-render, we should see quite a difference actually. So there we go, that's made a fair old difference to the water. The water now looks better, and what we've got left to do is we want to blur this background out a bit now. There's lots of ways you can do that. You could do it in compositing, but I don't really want to do it that way. Sometimes I do it with a plane in front that's transparent. I'm going to have a go with mist. Let's see what mist is going to do to our scene. So, go into the world settings. Now, mist always goes by the horizon colour, so we want to decide what colour our mist is going to be, and some kind of bluey grey is the usual thing, something like that. And down here you've got the mist area. I've just ticked it. Depth 25, start. I want it to start quite a way away, because I only really want this area here to get misty. Now I'm not sure about the depth, but we'll try a render with those settings and see what happens. Well, as you can see, that's far too much. The start isn't far enough away, and my depth is too close. So I'm going to take those way up, and let's try again. And now we can see that this area here in the background, that's maybe a little too misty, and this area here in the foreground is probably about right. So what we want to do is push the mist start back a bit and increase the mist depth again. So I'm going to increase the mist depth now to about 52 and the start to about 17, and let's have another go. So there we are. What I ended up doing is putting the start to 19.6, depth to 52.8. I made the horizon colour slightly bluer, and now you've got this bluff in the background there dropping into the background with atmospheric perspective. But I still want to blur it. Now you could do it with compositing, but that wouldn't affect the sky, and I want to affect the sky as well, because if you've got depth blur on a camera, naturally the sky is going to become blurred. So how to do this? Well, it's actually quite easy. Take a little bit of fiddling around. So the first thing to do is I'm going to put the cursor in the middle, cursor to center. I'm going to add another plane, tip it up at 90 degrees, and I'm going to take it so it's in between the two sets of bluffs. And it needs to cover the whole of the camera scene, so I need to scale it up quite a lot. Don't need it scaled the same way in both directions, and in fact the smaller it is, the better our render times will be. And I just need to check that it doesn't cover any of the other bluff. We're only covering what we want to, which is great. Actually, it doesn't need to be quite that big, I don't think. Right. So the way that we do it is by setting a material. New material. We're going to make it 0, 0 intensity, and you could make it shadeless, but sometimes that doesn't work. Ray trace transparency, IOR 1 because it's glass, it's air, so it's not going to change, and we're going to take the gloss down, maybe 0.6, so no, we'll have a look, and that's it. So if we now render again, so you can see what that's doing to blur out these bluffs in the background. We've gone a bit too far, so I'm going to stop rendering. By the way, I should also have told you to take the alpha and the specular transparency down to nothing. So I'm going to take the gloss up to 0.8ish, and we'll try again. Whoops. So there you are, and I think that is quite good enough, and I had to take the gloss all the way up to 0.93 to get the sort of effect I wanted, which is just a mild blurring. It's just enough to separate these foreground bluffs from the background and to make everything recede into the distance. It gives the picture some depth. Oh, there we go. Now what we want to do is put in the camera work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start further to the left. I'm going to finish up here. This is my end shot, if you like. So since this is my end shot, I need to put the keyframe in for it on the end. So if I show hide render view and view camera, select the camera by clicking near the frame, right clicking near the frame, and that is now selected the camera. I just want to make sure I've got nothing else selected as well actually, so I'll hit A and reselect. Right, so I'm going to insert a keyframe here at the end because this is our end shot. In fact, I'm going to be static at the end for a few frames, for about half a second maybe. So I'm going to put the keyframe there at frame 233, and I'm going to insert location and rotation on that. Now I'm going to start this from somewhere else. So if I go to the front, now I can move this camera by hitting G for grab. I can move it along, I can move it up, and you can see that I'm just starting to reach the edge here. So in actual fact I am going to keep going that way, but then I'm going to apply some rotate as well. So there I am. I'm higher and I'm further along. I'm going to click on the box, I'm going to apply some camera rotation. And I'm going to rotate like so. I'm going to insert location rotation there. I'm going to do a quick render of that just to see that that's a suitable framing and that there's no real problems with it. Okay, well, that's not too bad, is it? And this has exposed another material problem. As you can see here, we've got some lights appearing on the edges of our fir trees, and we've got some specularity appearing where there should be translucency out here and here. So I'm going to have a bit of a play around to fix that. And I think I know what is actually wrong. If I go into the fir tree material, you see the match there between that colour, and that I have actually got specular intensity on there. This was in order to give the trees a bit more 3D depth, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to take that away. If we're very lucky, that will be all that I need to do. And this framing here looks fine, apart from the fact that, well, I don't know, I mean there could be a huge drop down the other side, couldn't there? I was just thinking that maybe there need to be more trees in this sort of an area. Maybe the thing to do would be to frame it, to have the edge of one large tree. So I was thinking about putting a large tree somewhere in this composition anyway, and if I put a large tree in with a limb that went out there, then that would be pretty good. I think that would be very cool. So if we put that in, then we're going to have to model ourselves a big tree, bare tree limb, and that's not as difficult as it sounds. So I'm going to do the same as I did before. I'm going to go to another layer and do that bit of modelling now. So I'm going to add myself in a cylinder, and I don't think we need so many, maybe 20. Oh, actually it's the other way around, isn't it? It's going to be bang in the foreground, so we actually probably need more, maybe 40. So this is going to be the trunk of our tree, and I'm going to scale it up, and I'm going to add some vertices in it in a minute, because I'm going to do our old trick of applying a texture to make it nice and wobbly. And I'm going to scale it down at the top so that it tapers slightly, or actually that seems to be about the right size, so I might very well don't know. Let's have a look. Edit mode. And what I'm going to do first, I'm going to add some, we've got enough vertices around it, so I just want to add in loop, cut and slide. Which sometimes doesn't seem to want to work on cylinders, I have to admit. But there it is. And rotate the middle wheel, middle mouse wheel, to give us quite a few vertices. Bang, like that. And there we go. So that's good enough. Now we want to, oops, shouldn't have done that yet. This is where sometimes the sequence you do things in matters. So Control Z to undo. What I want to do is I want to tape this branch first. So I'm going to select that vertice, I'm going to select the edge loop, I'm going to scale it down so that there's some taper on it, some obvious taper on it. At the end of the day we need to be obvious in this. Now I'm going to go back to loop, cut and slide. I'm going to put a fair few. You can actually type in the number of cuts you want, but I like to do it until it kind of looks right, and that's about right, I think. So we'll accept that. Go into object mode, and I'm going to add my displace modifier. Take the strength down until we've got something reasonable. 0.07 maybe, something like that. Play around with the mid-level, which in this case isn't making much difference. Maybe I need to make that 0.08 or even 0.09. There we go, and the rest of it we'll do with quite a simple texture, a tree bark texture. So if we go view, camera, you can see where it is. I'm going to shift it upwards. Now this might not be near enough the camera, I don't know, but I know that if I get it to look right now, then if I scale it later, then we'll be fine. So I'm going to duplicate, not yet. I was going to say, oh, I'm going to duplicate what I've just done, but I'm not. I'm going to apply the material first, because otherwise the duplicated item will have a different material. So new material, and this material is going to be tree bark. Might as well give it some slightly brown colour, and maybe a bit darker than that actually, even in the specular. We're going to apply a tree bark texture, obviously, and I showed you that in the first tutorial. And it's here somewhere. Tree bark. How's that? It actually even says tree bark. So that's our tree bark texture. We're going to media tube. Projection, that's the obvious one to use. We'll see what it looks like in a moment. And X is along there, Y is along there, and we actually want more than one in the Y direction. So maybe we'll go for 4 in the Y direction. And the coordinates generated, that's absolutely fine. Colour 1, well, I'm going to drop that down to give it a bit of colour. Normal, and we'll see what it looks like. That's fairly good, except obviously it's not dark enough. So come back here, take the intensity right the way down, take the specular intensity right the way down, and the softness. As you can see, we're getting there. It's not too bad actually. We just want to make the whole thing a different, more brown colour, and the way to do that I think is going to be to one. That's pretty good. Can take the normal up even more. I like that. Now, what I want to do is I want to add a bit of green into it, but blend texture, and it's that sort of blend, and it's going to be tube again, and I'm going to give it a dark green colour, a bit like that. I'm going to turn the colour influence down, like so. And we'll see what that looks like. And it's applied on that side, which is the wrong side. So I'm going to scale it in X, and that scale is going to be -1. We should flip it over, see what we got. And yes, it has. You can see things are darker down that side, and what it is, we're not quite affecting the colour enough. So take that up again. And that's fine. Trees are always a bit darker on one side than another, and it's kind of a mossy thing. And now I think it's actually too brown. I hate to say that, but it is. So let's take the saturation down a bit. Not that far down. We'll take the brightness down. Also not that far down either. Try again. And there we go. That's something like a big old tree, as Bob Ross would say. So, now we've sorted all that out, I'm going to duplicate it, going to move it to one side, I'm going to rotate it because this is going to be a tree branch. And let's get the pine trees, they kind of go out about that sort of an angle. I'm going to scale it down. So obviously tree branches tend not to be the same size as the trunk. And that's going to go there, somewhere like that. That's good. I'm going to use a different strength and modifier on it. Make it a bit rougher, if anything. And I'm going to do some editing now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend some of these. Vertexes. There's a lot of different ways of doing that as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick some, and I'm going to. I've got lines selected. So select edge loop. I'm going to bend it. The way you bend it, simply rotate it a bit. And actually that's wrong, I should have had the others selected as well. So if we hit down here, select everything behind as well, C, increase the size of our circle using the middle mouse wheel. Now we've got all that lot, and we can rotate and reposition to our heart's content. And that might very well be enough. I don't know, without actually putting it in the scene and rendering it. We might want another branch going down there, a smaller branch. That would probably be good actually, so let's go back into object mode, and I need to make sure the end of that is actually inside our tree, which it is now. I'm going to duplicate it again. Only this time I'm going to scale it right the way down in that direction. I'm going to scale it up in that direction. And let's rotate it a bit. And rotate it, whoops, that way. And what does it look like from the camera point of view? Rubbish, because you can see the bottom of there, and you can't see. We want something that goes off in that direction, so it wants to be actually smaller. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't actually attach to the trunk, because it doesn't actually attach to the branch, because we're not ever going to see it. So there you go, something like that. And if we render that, what does it look like from the camera point of view? It looks okay, it's believable. It's going to be quite dark anyway. So, show hide render view. Select all of our bits of tree. I'm going to join them, and I'm going to rename it. It's going to be renamed Big Tree. And I'm going to move it back to our original there. click bang now, and it's not close enough, is it? Needs moving closer to the camera and scaling. It's a bit ridiculous. Okay, so we're going to move it closer to the camera and we're going to scale it. So you can see that that branch actually isn't attached, but it doesn't matter because from the camera angle you can't tell. There we go. We're going to scale the whole thing. And if you remember, we're going to be going that way and down, so probably better if it's there, then it blocks out every other tree. And as I said, we're going to be going to the right and down, so suddenly it matters, doesn't it? Because we can see that end there. I need to go into edit mode. And back into object mode. That's better. We're now all fixed. So our big tree's in the right sort of position to frame the frame, and as we move the camera you can see what happens. The big tree goes out of shot, which is exactly what we want to happen. Now we might actually be able to use this big tree somewhere else. Quite often around the edges of the lake you get a tree that has fallen in, and if we go to our end scene, is there a place where we could have such a thing? And there is actually over here. So what we could do, if we're cunning about it, is we can duplicate our big tree, and we can send him into the distance. It's easier to do it for your top. Well, we're going to send our big tree over here. We're going to scale him right the way down, because he doesn't want to be bigger than a part of one of those other trees. Something like that. And we'll view selected to get him in the right sort of place. And what we want to do is we want to rotate it and tiddle around with it so that it looks like a tree that's fallen in the water. It's going over here somewhere. think we want to be a bit bigger actually. I'm going to flip it over. This gets rid of that peculiar limb because it's going to be underground. There's a sudden decision on my part. And there you go. And obviously if it's fallen over it's going to be a bit further round than that, like so. We want to increase the height. So that some bits in the water, some bits out. And now if we view from the camera angle, what's it look like? Looks absolutely fine. Looks like a dead tree. That's good. So I'll just render that. You can see what it looks like. And as you can see, that's what that little area rendered out looks like. Now there's something I haven't told you before, I don't think, well, it's in my keyboard shortcuts tutorial, but if you go into camera view, and we're in camera view at the moment, then you can shift B and render just one small area. So if I hit shift B, I can draw a box around a little area, and then when I render image, it will render just that area. And this obviously is a lot quicker if you've only got one little place to check, like I was only checking really what that down tree looked like. Then this is the ideal way of doing it. As you can see, it's just rendered that little tiny area, just so that you can check something. It's dead easy. It's much better than rendering the whole scene. So let's go back to the first shot that we had, which is there, and I'm going to render that. Oops, sorry. For technical reasons, I need to start from frame 3 because I had some difficulties getting my trees to work properly without giving them a few frames to come in, so they come in at frame 3. So I'm going to render this and see what this looks like, but it's going to be the whole thing. Right, so this is what it looks like. There's still a couple of things wrong with it, but basically this tree is okay. It's not terrific. You could spend a lot more time on it. You could like fill in here so it looks like it's growing out of the tree and all the rest of it. But this tree is only going to be in shot for around about a second, so you're not going to get time to see it. We've still got some peculiar bits around these trees. I'm not quite sure what that is. But there is one glaring error, and that's here, and that's the fact that these bluffs aren't tall enough and I can see the sky underneath the bluff. So I need to increase the vertical scale on this front set of bluffs to remove that area there. But apart from that, this is looking okay, I think. Bearing in mind it's going to be an animation, nothing is going to be still, everything's going to move all the time, and that lets you get away with an awful lot. But we're looking okay. We've got rocks, we've got foreshore, we've got areas where the forest is, we've got forest up on top of the bluffs. And I can see also this I think is the edge of that plane that I put in, so that needs scaling that way as well. So let's do those things. Dee dee. Plane. No, it's not the edge of the plane. So what that is it's a join in the sky which wasn't visible to us before. So now I need to go back to my world texture. You can see where the sky joins, and that's going to be a problem. So there we go. Gonna have to put that back to 0 again and see what it looks like. Oh, I'll move those bluffs first actually. I'll see you in a minute. So there we are, and that's the end of this tutorial. This is where I'm leaving it. Next tutorial we'll be adding some life into the scene and then preparing to render, and then I'll show you what the final output looks like. I'll also be playing with the lighting somewhat. So, thank you very much.